On behalf of the American Society for Cell Biology, I'm here to recognize your work on behalf of researchers. We really appreciate all of the support that you've done for the NIH and for NIH-funded researchers across the United States. NIH has always benefited from congressional partnerships. So first we had the Harlan-Specter partnership, now we have the Blunt and Cole team. So we really appreciate that. Since you've taken the helm of your respective subcommittees, it's really amazing. The NIH budget has increased by $10 billion, almost 30% increase. So that's gone from around $30 billion to $40 billion today. And as we said, that sort of slow, steady increases that are dependable are just the lifeblood of the biomedical sciences. In addition, not only has the NIH budget grown, but we really felt the support for NIH and the research grow here on the Hill. When our scientists come up to visit their members, they're met with support, and we really appreciate that. So thank you, and I'd like to ask Connie to say a few words as well.
Thanks, Erica. So yeah, your leadership in the House, both the House and Senate, in terms of NIH funding has really made a tremendous impact on biomedical research. And this is not just in Bethesda, but it's across all 50 states, and I know you're aware. And so for years, our community has really hoped for sustainable and dependable funding. And not only is this essential to keep the research progress going and to drive new technology, to drive innovation, but it also creates jobs and really trains the next generation of scientific leaders. So it's really essential. And the cycles of feast and famine really don't work for science. Science needs to progress in a dependable way. So a few years ago, many scientists were talking about running out of funding, worried about getting the next grant, and really concerned that they might have to shut down their research labs. But due to your support, the dependable funding has allowed our members to really focus on the science and allowed us as a community to also address other important issues. Thanks to the support from NIH, the American biomedical research community has made advances in many areas of medicine, such as stem cell related treatments that are in phase 2 and 3 clinical trials. Immunotherapy has really revolutionized cancer treatment and potentially other diseases as well. There's been advances in neuroscience, delaying or even potentially preventing neurodegenerative disease. New technologies like CRISPR technology, trying to edit genes and prevent disease. And things like organoids that serve as model systems to test drugs and to allow the study of disease development. So these are just a few examples, and hopefully there'll be many more with your support. So congratulations, and now we're really honored to present you with these awards and hopefully hear a few words from you.
Well, thank you very much.
Representative Cole.
Thank you, we're quite honored.
Very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
When Tom and I had a chance to do these two jobs at the same time, the chairman in the House, the chairman of the Senate, what a great opportunity for me. We had worked together in the House. Tom Cole's always been one of my closest friends and one of the best legislators. And frankly, for our side, these bills are so big and have so many programs in them, some that work and some that don't. Sort of the long-standing view for a while by many people in the House and Senate had been, we're for everything. And we just decided we weren't going to be for everything. We were going to really try to set some priorities. And it appears, looking at what you all have mentioned already today with CRISPR technology, immunotherapy, which I don't think anybody was talking about 5 years ago. I think the first time I had a discussion on this topic at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, they weren't even calling it immunotherapy yet. It was CAR-T. Francis Collins came and made a CAR-T presentation. The last time we had an update on what was happening out there, immunotherapy, 4 years later, is just in a quick list of things that everybody is doing every day. And then we also have the great advantage of having the guy who headed the Human Genome Project, who knows more about this than anybody else. Now that we know how we're all, each of us is different from everybody else, and what does that mean? And so what a great time, and we've looked at young researchers and other things, but we really have had to, particularly in the first couple of years, eliminate programs that weren't working, combine programs that weren't working as well as they should have. For me at least, to have a partner like Tom Cole is as good as it gets.
Well, I can say about as many nice things back, obviously, but to reinforce Roy's point, I think this year's bill actually is an example of that. We only got an additional $1 billion increase in the entire bill. NIH got $2 billion. So that means it got all the new money, and we had to make some tough choices someplace else so that that additional money could be directed there. And I think that's been a hallmark. I have to give the senator here, frankly, the credit for thinking through how we would do this. He is a master legislative strategist. But you know, the last time we had a burst of funding for the NIH in the late 90s and early part of the 21st century, the goal was we're going to double the funding. And one of the first things I remember Roy saying was, let's not do that again, because once we set a goal and reach it, we'll stop. And that's exactly what had happened for a dozen years. So the idea was, let's do something that is sustainable, inflation plus every year. And let's try to build the muscle memory, if you will, in the appropriations process, that we just start out with the idea that's what we do. The nice thing about this particular one, and we had talked about several, and this was the obvious one, but I know at least in my committee, I have a lot of hearings, and the committee had been not dormant, but it had 4 or 5, and we more than tripled them. And NIH was always one of them. I always take, honestly, the committee out to NIH every year. But I wanted to listen to my members in a very contentious committee on both sides of the aisle and see where were the areas that they wanted to work together. I know where they're going to fight. And biomedical research was number one. I mean, all across everybody knows somebody that has you know, a terrible disease, or their family has been struck in something. This was something they wanted to do. The other two, by the way, were early childhood and first generation college students. I mean, they wanted to do that. They wanted to provide opportunities there. So you can take a very contentious committee. If you can find a common goal, they all work together. And again, I'm sure Senator Blunt would be the first to tell you, if he didn't have a cooperative partner in Senator Murray, and I didn't have a cooperative partner in Rosa DeLaura, this wouldn't be happening the way it does. But this is something that they can be enthusiastically for as well. So, you know, our hope is this will continue. As a matter of fact, I actually told Rosa, who's a good friend and a magnificent legislator, I said, you know, God forbid you get this gavel next time, but you may. And if you do, and you don't continue this process, I'm going to, you know, really take your hide off on it. Because I'm going to go, well, under Republicans, you know. And so you want to make, part of legislating is that way. I've done this in other areas. You want to get a virtuous competition going between the parties when they're trying to outdo one another to do something positive and good. And I think that's what we've been able to do with NIH.
I think that's right. You know, the other thing we heard too that first year was the young researchers are leaving the field. Yeah. That the researchers that know exactly how to get a grant, that have a great background, are getting the ever diminishing dollars, about 23% in buying power where they were a decade earlier. And young researchers were taking that great ability and going somewhere else. They were becoming financial analysts or commodities traders or wherever else the opportunity was, even though they would want to be researchers. And we've encouraged, and NIH has insisted that every year a significant amount of that money go to first-time researchers with multi-year grants. That's made a big difference there. You mentioned every state, all 50 states have at least one project. We have members of your group. I think we have slightly more than 100 in our state. And you know, at Washington University, they're working on a blood test for Alzheimer's for early detection and much easier detection of what might be out there in your future. At St. Louis University, they have a study now with a control group on a vaccine for Zika. At the University of Missouri at Columbia, they've developed a treatment for multiple sclerosis and working on that. And all of that is part of this effort, and all of that is part of the efforts that your organization encourages as well.
Yeah, I think getting the process going, I remember the first year we got $2 billion, and I talked to Dr. Collins, and I said, well, we just obviously got how fast will this take? He said, it's in motion now. You know, we grade the grants every year. We were able to do 1 in 6. Now it's 1 in 5. So we're literally now able to contact people. And I think that same year or the next year, I was talking to Dr. Hodis who heads up the Aging Institute, and of course is very heavily involved in Alzheimer's, and that's been a major priority of ours because honestly it's not only an awful and terrible thing, and that's first and foremost the challenge, but it's an expensive thing. It's the most expensive disease that we have. We have a real incentive to try and do something to either slow it down or hopefully cure it. But anyway, I called him up after we had the first major increase in funding, and I said, I know it's early, but can you tell anything? He said, yeah, I can tell something. The number of applications I've gotten are up over 28%. I said, you put a signal out there that this is important and there will be resources here. Believe me, we will get the proposals coming in. I mean, the process of signaling through the system to researchers to know there's the support they need to accomplish the goals that only they can achieve. I think it's been really important, and then sustaining that over a 4-year period has been probably the most critical contribution.
And when you're visiting with our colleagues, just continue to encourage them to help us and encourage us to get more of this done. We hope we're on a sustainable path to where we're looking at 5 or 6% increase plus inflation until there's no more NIH research that's productively being done. And we don't think that's likely to happen for a while.
We think our careers will be over well before that time.
We will all be. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. You bet. It was really a delight to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. You bet.
Thank you.